think in Sri Lanka, there is a perception of the diaspora, and particularly the Tamil diaspora, as being pro-LTT. And it's certainly true that the diaspora has pro-LTT elements, but those are not the only. The diaspora, just like Sri Lanka itself, is very diverse. Sri Lanka has so many different cultures, so many different lines of political thought. And actually, I think especially now that the war is over, more and more people are able to speak up in a way that they weren't before. And in fact, you're seeing more and more differences of opinion, and you're also seeing differences of opinion that had been suppressed for a very long time, or that frankly LTT supporters had made it hard for people to express. You're seeing some of those people starting to get their voices back. And so, I hope people in Sri Lanka recognize that the diaspora is just as varied and complicated in some ways as Sri Lanka itself.
The British Tamil Forum had the commemoration Mullivaikal victims at the Trafalgar Square in London, and several UK parliamentarians and a number of other senior politicians and the likes of the Deputy Mayor of London, and there was also an MP from Sri Lanka, Mr. Sritharan. They were all there.
One of the reasons sometimes that I'm careful about going to public events, I've been critical of the LTT, and I want to make sure that when I'm remembering people who were lost in that final battle, that I don't want to be perceived as pro-LTT. I'm not pro-LTT. And I think that there are a great many people in the diaspora who just want to remember people who were lost. And I think that it doesn't leave those people much room. And certainly the LTT was responsible for holding people in those, for not letting them out. I know that I've read a lot about how the LTT kept people in that final battle zone, in the no-fire zone, wouldn't let them out, claimed that people were there of their own accord. And there were a lot of people who dispute that, including people who survived. So I want to make sure that I have room to express how I feel, regardless of other people's desire to take those public events and turn them a different way, which is not how I feel.
The BTF will not encourage people to bring flags or anything like that. But the thing is, there are always going to be people holding flags, and this is a free country. Unlike Sri Lanka, you can, there's free speech. You're always going to get people from both sides holding flags. So that is unavoidable. But what is important is to investigate what really went on there. And the justice is important for all those people, relatives who have lost their loved ones in the war. And most of the people don't know whether their loved ones are still there, whether they're living, because they were taken into custody by the Sri Lankan government. And the government doesn't say whether they have killed them or not, because they're always refusing to publish the list of detainees.
I think a lot of people have benefited from the war being over, and I think that it's important to recognize that there are good people among those who fought for the Sri Lankan Armed Forces. At the same time, the tone of the celebration seems to me really, unfortunately, jingoistic and somewhat one-sided. And I really regret that the state doesn't seem to be making room for remembrance of all its citizens who, of course, the military suffered losses. For all of its citizens who suffered losses in especially that final battle, and they are choosing to commemorate specifically really that final battle by picking that day, really to. I mean, that's what a lot of people are thinking of. I think, those last days when certainly, civilians lost their lives, and civilians lost their lives throughout. I think that we all know that. Sinhalese civilians, Muslim civilians, Tamil civilians, and in fact, and it's not just true of the Sri Lankan government. I think governments around the world fail to recognize civilian loss.
My perception is that the state had these events, but what the state has not done is to recognize that major part of the society who have lost their loved ones, and some people don't know whether their loved ones are still living or not. It has not actually um, sympathized or said anything about those people. If you remember, the president of Sri Lanka, Mr. Rajapaksa, said that there was zero casualty. It was a humanitarian operation, no civilian casualty, and that's what he said in the first commemoration event or the celebration event. It's actually a triumphalism event.
The people in those areas who are being resettled, who are being returned to their homes, I think, are hoping to return to their lives and to be able to have real agency in rebuilding their own lives. And this is what I get from my friends whom I speak to there, that the military is involved in certain parts of commerce that would be better handled by civilians. That simply just sort of that there's a problem there when there's a group of people there with weapons, and then another group of people that don't have them. And I think that is not a great that's not a good foundation for rebuilding a strong civil society. I'd really love to see the North and East demilitarized, people's lives return to normal there, and I'd love to see devolution, to see power devolved to provinces, and for local authorities to have a lot more control over the way that their political lives are run, to feel that they have agency, and that the provinces really have control, and that power in Sri Lanka isn't so centralized. I think provincial councils would be wonderful. That would be a huge move, and it seems like one that so many people support, and one that would empower so much of Sri Lanka's citizenry, not just in the North and East, in the South as well.
For reconciliation to take place in Sri Lanka, what is important is justice. Justice must be served, and for that, the British Tamil Forum is calling for an international independent investigation into war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by both sides. Now, and also you have to treat your fellow human beings equally. If Tamils are looked as second-class citizens, there can never be a reconciliation. Colonization in the North and East, and trying to change the demography of North and East. So I don't think there can be genuine reconciliation. Without reconciliation, it's affecting the country's economy as well. As you know, the country's economy is in bad shape, and the average Sri Lankan is suffering as a result. Now, when an investigation takes place and justice is served, I don't think the Tamils will have any problem in dealing with the Sinhalese people, because they know that majority of the Sinhalese people are very nice people. So I think the Sinhalese people must work with us to find justice.